Hello and welcome to Somerville Community Access Television and Greater Somerville's continuing coverage of the 2015 municipal elections. I'm Joe Lynch, producer and host of Greater Somerville, and it is my pleasure to introduce you to the 5 Alderman-at-Large candidates whose names will appear on the November 3rd, 2015 ballot. The 5 candidates for Somerville Alderman-at-Large are Jack Conley, Sean Fitzgerald, Mary Joe Rosetti, Dennis Sullivan, and William White. We hope you find these candidate profiles helpful when you vote in this year's election. If you need more information about voting in this year's municipal election, please visit the City of Somerville's website or call the Elections Department at City Hall. As always, stay safe, stay informed, and thank you for watching. And I'm here with multiple-term Alderman Jack Conley. Jack is now running again for Alderman-at-Large. He and his family make their home in the Davis Square district of the City of Somerville. It is my pleasure to welcome back to Somerville Community Access Television, Alderman-at-Large Jack Conley. Welcome back.
Joe, it's always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, you are quite welcome. You know, we do this as a courtesy to all the candidates in the city. And I think, I was trying to think back, Jack, I think this is our 5th time that you and I have faced off across the table, and we're still doing it.
And you know what, Joe, for me, really, it's fun. It's a great chance for me to help get a little more information out to people in the community. Not everybody here has been here a long time now. Thankfully, a lot of people found the city, and it's a great opportunity for them to find a little bit about what SCAT has and what I'm all about.
Well, speaking of which, you know, Jack, it's always better coming from you, your background. You know, as you say, there are folks who have arrived since last election. They may want to know who these government officials are and the elected officials. So tell the folks a little bit about yourself.
Joe, happy to. I'm a second-generation son of Irish immigrants who left their native land because they couldn't eat the view, as my grandfather said. Settled right here in Union Square, actually. Raised 9 members of the family, including my dad, and as a result, I've lived here in Somerville my entire life since early 1950s. Went to school here. I now make my day job here in Davis Square, running a small insurance agency with several Somerville natives as well. I've had the good fortune of serving the city as a ward alderman in the Davis Square area for quite a while, and have had the good fortune now to serve the entire city since 2008, and my ward background gave me a great opportunity to deal with much larger and broader city issues. Fortunately, I have the pleasure of being married to my wife Gail and the dad of 3 wonderful girls, all who have gone through the Somerville school system and have done well. Thankfully, they have my wife's good looks and brains and my stamina, so things have gone well.
That was very well done, Jack. I'm sure that your wife Gail will appreciate that too. So, Jack, we're going to talk about the elephant in the room, as I've said to the other candidates, which is one of the biggest issues facing anyone here in the city is the affordability issue. Whether it's the cost of living in the city itself, the fees and fines from the city, but I think the majority of what they're talking about is housing. The cost of rents have skyrocketed and gone through the roof. First-time home buyers, some first-time home buyers are afraid to even look at the real estate in this city. Let's frame it from the standpoint of the affordability, the way that we see it today, what the city is trying to do in terms of trying to keep it affordable, especially for those who have lived their entire lives in the city, or seniors and first-time home buyers coming in. Take it away.
Sure. Well, let's look first at the big picture, Joe, and that we're all products of the post-war boom, and way back when Franklin Delano Roosevelt, as part of the New Deal, instituted the Fannie Mae, specifically designed to help low-income and middle-income families. What's happened now? Fannie Mae is getting out of that business. Look in the papers the last several days. There have been a number of stories about what's happening. Fannie Mae, the mortgage lender, has basically put people out of homes in low-income and middle-income areas, and are now allowing those homes to be sold at auction to high-value people who basically are displacing those folks. Is that fair? I don't think so. It wasn't designed to do it. It's doing it. So it's not just a Somerville problem. It's a regional, state, and it's a national problem. A number of other communities around the country have that particular issue. Here in Somerville, I wish we could wave a magic wand, Joe, and make everything the same for everybody. We can't do that. However, we have been very proactive here with elderly housing. Anybody who's new to the city can look around and see that we have a plethora of available elderly and low-income housing, because our predecessors government have made it a priority to make sure we have much more elderly and low-income housing out of our neighboring communities. Can we do more? We're certainly doing our best to make sure. The feds have gotten out of the housing business. The state, not a lot better, so it's basically on us.
When you say the feds and the state are getting out of the housing business, I think you're referring to federal housing projects, such as we have two in the city. We have up at North Street, and we have the Mystic View.
Right, and there's both federal and state levels down at Mystic, but yes, you're right. It's that subsidized stuff, and there are a number of Section 8 certificates that are subsidized here by both the federal and the state level that are used to get units here in the city. We have hundreds of those, which are a great assist, but it's not, so it can't be done by itself.
As a consequence of those two entities really getting out of the housing business, it's now falling to the municipalities to figure out how to house less than affluent folks. And that's where it comes into the affordable housing initiatives in the city. Right now, we're sitting at a 12.5% set aside for multiple unit, anything over 6, I believe it is. And the city is trying to go through some zoning changes at this point because of our gentrification, because of our renaissance. We're changing the zoning to allow greater density, specifically around transit sites, Union Square, for example, Assembly Square, some other locations across the city. But there are some, Jack, who are saying that we're not moving fast enough because the developers are here, they're building, and they're not being required to set aside more affordable housing. Your take on those two components, the rezoning and the initiatives that are out there to take it from 12.5 to 15 to possibly 20?
First off, I have no issues with going from 12.5 to 15 and perhaps even to 20, because the market will bear that particular cost. All you have to do is look to our neighbor in Boston and see the huge number of units that are being done there. The developers
and Boston's high density, some of them are at 20%.
Correct, and I don't think we'll have an issue with that because the timing is right. The timing, again, Joe, because the city is looking at updating the zoning, which has been in place for some 25 years, and we're doing it because of what you mentioned earlier. We're going to be seeing transit stops here, right here in Union Square for the beginning, and then there'll be 4 more coming right afterwards. Our summer vision plan that took 3 years and 60-odd people to develop and plan is pushing the higher density around the transit stop so people can walk to the stations to get into town and do their business. Makes that a major advantage and a big draw. We can see it right here in Union Square now, Joe, because even well before the subway station arrives, the cost of housing has gone up here. People are obviously seeing that as a benefit. I see that as a major draw to the community because we know gas prices can go up and go down. They're down now, but a year from now they could be back up again. People want to be near public transportation. It's basically, I think, what Somerville is drawing because of the other successes the city's had in many ways. People want to be close and nearby. They can take the advantages of getting in out of Boston, Cambridge, other areas. Route 2, 93 are all close by for those people who do drive. So we offer location, location, and location again for those folks.
Location, 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 Jack. But you know, one of the wrinkles in that is the billion-dollar overrun on the Green Line. What happens, and I'm not going to ask it, corner you, but are there discussions taking place at the Board of Aldermen and City Hall? What if the Green Line gets delayed again, and we're still allowing the developers to build at the 12.5?
Well, I don't see a problem with moving ahead on the 12.5 up to 15 because whether the Green Line is delayed a short period of time, and my guess is maybe be short, but I think the political will has driven that process. I think the governor is only trying to make sure we don't have a big dig 2 with the Green Line and is doing as he should, making sure the controls there. If we have to rebid something because the prices came in way too high. All right, that's the prudent thing to do. We've already spent $500 million in money, so I don't think it's going to be tossed out. As a result, it might be delayed, but I think it's going to be going forward. My take is we can move up to certainly 15%, and based on what the market will bear, we've got plenty of experts in the city and in the region to tell us what the forecast will be. So 15 certainly at a very minimum ought to be the city's view from now.
You know the city like the back of your hand, Jack. Tell us what some of the voters are talking about: the parking issues, the rats, the taxes, the water and sewer rates, the fees, the fines, the crime.
Let's start with the crime first, Joe, because the people, the new folks that move in, as you know, I have a 2-year-old dog that I walk pretty regularly, and I meet a lot of people on the community path or walking through the squares, and people tell me how much they enjoy it here. And what I hear all the time is, I really feel safe, particularly from young men and women who are new to the community. I really feel comfortable here. I feel like there's so much activity that I'm comfortable here. Check with the police. The crime wave has really gone down dramatically for any kind of violent assault type crimes because of cell phones and the proximity of people. As far as public health issues, we had a huge spike a couple of years ago in East Somerville for rodent activity because of the very mild winter, and rodents bred like crazy. This past winter, thanks to all the cold, snow, and ice, those numbers have declined. Do we still have issues in East Somerville? Yes, we do. Other parts of the city where new construction is going on, we do. But the numbers have gone down dramatically. You can look at the numbers and see the charts of call-ins to 311 about activity. Are there flare-ups here and there? There certainly are. But covering the dumpsters, inspecting the restaurants, make sure the trash barrel are covered. Those tickets, although people may not like them, they have been more effective. Nobody likes traffic tickets, Joe. None of us like getting them. But it is an incentive for people to be more careful. We do a great job at the street sweeping. Many people have awareness. You can sign up for phone, text, email alerts. The opportunities are there to get warnings, so I don't think it's a major issue. People mention it, but they grumble, but they really don't complain. They know it's a help.
We're going to, speaking of quality of life issues, we're going to have a change in the snow removal policy this year. I saw the press release that came out from City Hall.
I did.
We're going to make many, many people happy, and we're going to anger some people. Why don't you talk a little bit about what you're hearing from the constituency about this new snow removal policy?
Joe, I can tell you, having served quite a while as a ward alderman in the Davis, Ball Square, and Potter Square area, every winter, except for calls about parking, snow removal was probably the second largest number of calls. Now it's emails, but that is a huge concern every winter. This past couple of winters, people, hey, it's just not fair. The perception of unfairness that drives most people. Hey, how come I have to live with this? No one mentioned when I bought my house that this was going to be the case, that I'd have the snow plow back on my sidewalk. Now the perception is, at least this will be fair. I may not like it no matter what side of the street you're on when you've just shoveled the walk and driveway and all of a sudden a plow comes along, makes the street open again, but at least the perception is that it'll be fair. I think the concept is a good one, and that perception that it's fair to all is going to make life a little bit more livable for people.
Well, you've been up the street, my street. You've
More
canvassed my street, so you know it's the width of a driveway, and both sides get it, no matter what kind of plow you send up. You know, the mayor has some, we're moving on to cost in the city again, Jack. The mayor has some grandiose plans on new high school, new library, new police headquarters, new fire headquarters. That's going to take a considerable amount of money. That usually falls to borrowing. Your thoughts on moving forward with those proposals?
Sure. Well, I think people have heard me a long time say government exists primarily for two reasons: to provide for the public safety and to provide for education. And from my point of view, anything you do to improve public safety, and that includes fixing the old car barn right here in Union Square that has housed the police department for a long time and a little bit of the fire department. Time for an overhaul. They can perhaps live somewhere else in the city. It's a good idea to look at how to do that, take care of our men and women in both the police and fire service, and put them in fire stations that will access neighborhoods quickly. Makes sense, good thing to do. That's our first priority and should be explored. Second, as far as the new high school goes, like I said, government should be it should be our second priority. Our high school building is almost 30 years old for one portion of it. There's about $10 million in brickwork necessary. It certainly served the city well. The School Building Assistance Fund, Joe, through the state of Massachusetts, may allow us up to 80% of the funds. It's incumbent on us to look at alternative sites, whether we build it on site there at the high school up on Highland Ave, or we look at possibly going to where the DPW is down in Franey Road. The DPW could live at either end of the city and other locations. We'd have the use of the field next to the school. That could be a possibility. We already own the land. The borrowing capability, Joe, we have a very high bond rating. Moody's, all the bond rating people have us rated very high in the A ranges. As long as we maintain the consistent sources of our income, it makes sense and it's prudent for us to look at these as options for a police, fire, or a new high school. There's also the talk about a new library here. We have a number of opportunities to avail ourselves of library funds. The Carnegie Foundation still makes monies available. We would perhaps be looking, and the mayor said, down the road for perhaps a new library. Building presently up in Highland has served us all very well, but
And a magnificent building.
a wonderful building that we will preserve because it's a Carnegie building, and that will be very well utilized by the city.
Let me go back to one thing. I would say that, you know, utilizing the land that's existing behind the high school, there you can have density and you can go up, and I don't think you're going to get a whole lot of complaints from neighbors. But Jack, let me point the viewers to your website and how they can get a hold of you.
Certainly, I'm very accessible, Alderman, aldermanjackconley.com. We have information available there. We keep that updated. I'm also on Facebook, and I'm also on Twitter. It's all in the information's on the website. I tend to send some notices out every day. We're certainly asking people to consider coming out on November 3rd to support the efforts that all of us, the at-large members and the aldermen from the individual wards, all but Ward 6 are uncontested. Seems most people think that they're doing a good job.
One of the newcomers to the city asked me, how can I get a hold of the alderman at large? And I said, well, one of them I know, all you have to do is go down Davis Square. You find him anytime. Alderman at large, Jack Conley, I want to thank you for joining us today.
Joe, it's a pleasure being here, and I'd certainly welcome you to come in to 19 College Ave, say hello, stop in.
Best wishes on November 3rd.
Thank you, Joe.
And I'm here with two-time challenger for a seat on the Board of Aldermen for Alderman at Large, Sean Fitzgerald. Sean is a resident of Ward 7, and it is my pleasure to welcome him here to the Somerville Community Access Television Studios. Welcome down.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks for being here.
You know, whenever I address somebody who lives in the western part of the city, I always say, welcome down. But with the amount of development that's going on in Union Square, I should say, welcome to Uptown.
I think that's the new apropos. Somerville, absolutely.
So, Sean, thanks for coming in.
My pleasure.
This will give the voters a little bit more exposure to who Sean Fitzgerald is. I know you've been knocking doors and doing your canvassing since the early spring. But tell the voters, you know, there may be some new folks in town. Tell the voters and tell the citizenry a little bit more about Sean Fitzgerald.
Sure. I'm a longtime community activist. I've lived in Somerville for over 10 years now, since 2004. I've grown up in a family of dedicated public servants. My first political experience was holding a sign for Hubert Humphrey's presidential campaign in 1968. And I've always believed in giving back to my community. That's how my wife and I raise our two children. They both have go to the Somerville public school system and have been so since the days at the pre-K at the Capuano School, of which I was the vice president of the PTA there, and later at the West Somerville Neighborhood School. I got involved in Somerville by volunteering for Dorothy Kelly Gay's campaign for lieutenant governor. Subsequently helped run her upset campaign for mayor in 1999, and then went to City Hall with her for several years, and then went on to become chief of staff to Senator Charles Shannon, the late Senator Charles Shannon, and now I am currently the chief of staff to Representative Jay Kaufman. He's the chair of the Revenue Committee up on the State House at Beacon Hill.
Terrific. And I know you're involved. I know personally that you are involved in Somerville Little League as well.
I've been involved in the Somerville Little League sports scene and basketball scene for the last 6 or 7 years, coaching both baseball and basketball for both my son and daughter.
Great.
And they play.
Do the voters have a website or any way to contact you if there's something that we haven't covered in our little profile here?
Yes, in fact, they do. My website address is Sean, S-E-A-N, the number 4, alderman.com.
Very good. Let's go right into one of the major issues facing a lot of folks here in the city, which is the affordability issue. Not only on the cost of living in the city of Somerville in 2015, but primarily on the cost of housing, whether you're a renter, a first-time buyer, or a long-time owner of property. The expense of being here in the city is skyrocketing. Your thoughts a little bit, Sean, about how, if you were successful in November, how you would propose moving through this mind-boggling issue of affordability.
Well, I think we have two major problems in our housing stock right now and the trend that we're going to. One is the size of the units being offered. They're really not family-size units. There's units that are 8 to 1,200 square feet, mostly millennials, and that's not a working family that can come in and be affordable in Somerville. I think the success of Somerville has the downside that it's less affordable. I also see just a nonstop proliferation of condo developments, and that's been ongoing for the last 5 to 7 years. You have the traditional 3-decker stock that had a family in Somerville being made into condos, 3 separate condos, all selling for $500,000-$600,000 per condo. And I think that's going a long way to taking the fabric and the originalness of Somerville out and making it a community that is tough to afford.
So it's, you know, some of these other folks are being able to afford it, though. I hear it, the issue of affordability, and what some people have said to me, Sean, is that it's really coming down to almost like a class warfare. Is those who are more affluent, who have the younger folks who have better paying jobs, they can afford the $600,000, the $700,000 price tags, whereas somebody who's blue collar or less than affluent, they can't even afford to save for a down payment. So let's address that issue in terms of the set aside for affordable housing. You have folks who are advocating taking it from its current 12.5 all the way up to 20%. Your thoughts on that in terms of the new zoning codes that are being written and the consideration for hiking the set aside for affordable housing? Well,
I think there's some problems with the new zoning code, but that's a whole other issue. I would strongly be in favor of 20%. I'd be in favor of 25%. I think that developers that are coming in, they can afford to give that percentage of affordable housing because they're making the money on the bulk of the housing that's not affordable. And I think we should really go a long way to stimulating commercial development and really stop trying to make Somerville more dense, because we're having a problem right now getting housing in that's affordable.
So you don't see that hiking of the set-aside scaring away the developers. The offset to that is really to stimulate more commercial development in the city.
I think there's no way that any developer will be scared away from Somerville. It's the hottest market right now going on. You have Assembly Square that's just taking off to what was envisioned 15 years ago. I think there's no way a developer will be scared away. The developers always play that game, that if you do that, we'll leave. We've seen that with tax breaks for companies that come in and say, we'll go to North Carolina or Georgia. It's a phantom argument, and I think it doesn't hold.
Let's stay with affordability in the city a little bit more. The parking fees and fines, the taxes, the water bills. What are you hearing from the voters in terms of those issues?
Outrage. I think it's way too high. I think it's way too onerous. I think we're a metropolis around Somerville, Boston, Cambridge, and Medford, and I think we have the worst parking restrictions going on. And that's when I'm out knocking doors, I hear a lot of that, and I get the argument that we need the revenue. But I think if we had more commercial development, we wouldn't have to be as onerous. And
unfortunately, the Board of Aldermen do not control the Traffic Commission, who are the ones that set the fees and fines. Would you be in favor of dismantling that commission and bringing it under the guidance of the board?
I wouldn't be in favor of dismantling it, but I certainly would be in favor of having under the purview of the Board of Aldermen.
Okay. Crime in the city. We're seeing a precipitous drop in major violent crime in the city. Do you think that's due to Mayor Joe Curtatoni's policies? Do you think it's due to the chief of police being taken out of civil service? What do you attribute it to?
I attribute it to Mayor Curtatone and the police force working together to really reinstitute community policing and having a dialogue with the residents. I see community police officers everywhere, all over the city, and I think they should both take a bow, because we've had a really nice drop in crime, and I think that's something that they should both have kudos for.
Taxes. Understanding that as your house is assessed for a higher value, naturally your tax bill will go up. Taxes, the build-out of Assembly, the build-out of a lot of different parts of the city, the commercial revenue that was coming in from those was supposed to offset any kind of significant tax increase. What are your thoughts if you're successful in November and the mayor comes and says, I'm going to hike the fee again? I'm going to hike the tax rate.
I would try to have a dialogue, a conversation with them against that. I think that really the focus should be on smart development in both Assembly Square and Union Square, but more so smaller community development. I think a lot of these areas where you see a lot of small developments that are overlooked, because I think the administration's focus is on the big ticket, and it's on Assembly Square and Union Square. And I see a lot of development all around the city that is lying fallow. We had the Powder House Community School has been dormant for 5 or 6 years. There's a hole in the ground in my neighborhood in Teal Square for the last 3 years. You have the development that is currently waiting right by Conway Park on Somerville Ave. I think there's a lot of that development. I think, understandably so, the mayor and the administration is focused on the big ticket, and I think maybe a little bit too much.
The Board of Aldermen and the Traffic Commission and the Mayor's office have all been deluged, especially since last winter's snow was brutal in anyone's estimation. They have just released the press release announcing that they will alternate the side of the street parking for snow removal this year. Anybody talk to you about that during your canvassing this year?
Yes, all in my neighborhood, and anybody that's on my side of the street, I'm all in favor of that. I live on the even side, and we've had to suffer having, seeing the across the street always have the street plowed, and I think it's a matter of fairness. It's an issue of fairness, and I'm all for that change.
Well, I just thank my lucky stars I live in a one-way street, but that's okay. You know, a nice segue, you were talking about the Powder House School. We also have other vacant buildings in the city, such as the Homans Building. One of the proposals that the mayor has come forth with, which is seems grandiose, to use a phrase by somebody else in the media, new high school, new police department, police headquarters, new fire headquarters, new library. How are we going to pay for this, and what are your thoughts on whenever the mayor comes to you and says, if you're successful in November, I want to bond 40 million, 80 million, 100 million for all these new projects?
I would look at that with a little bit of trepidation. I think that those three proposals you just mentioned are big proposals just in and of themselves. So all three of them in a row, I would see we would need a quantum increase in commercial tax revenue. I think the new growth in Assembly Square was 3.9 million. I would see $10 million out of the Assembly Square project. And then we can start talking about those projects. I think they're laudable goals. I definitely think we need a new high school. We absolutely need a new library. And we need a new police station 15 years ago.
Would you be in favor of relocation of that library down into Union Square, as the mayor has stated?
I would have to take a look at what his specific plans are. I think it's a beautiful building now and a great facility, and it's about as centrally located as it can. I would caution, if the library was there, we would have to have a definite commitment for the Green Line to be in Union Square.
Let's move on just a little bit. We were talking about the Green Line. As you know, the state has announced that the expense for the Green Line has blown through the ceiling. It is now $1 billion over budget. Union Square, it looks like Union Square will get its spur. Your thoughts in terms of the board, if you're successful in November, the Board of Aldermen will weigh in a lot on what actually gets cut. The governor's office and the MBTA and the Department of Transportation are all looking at paring back the project in order to reduce the expense. What are your thoughts in terms of how the city of Somerville should move forward with that?
Well, I think what we should do is try to take a hard look at why the MBTA continues to operate in the millions of dollars of a deficit. I think that they were sued, and they can say we're bound by that suit, but in the end of the day, they need the money to have that project go, and the federal government, which is matching money, will hold back on that if they see the state does not have that commitment. So I see a lot of different proposals that US2 and Somerville have proposed. I think everybody should get together and say what is going to happen if this project doesn't come in on the timetable. I think it'll happen eventually. It just might not happen on the timetable that we're looking at. Major issues that your voters and your potential voters are looking at. You've been canvassing since the spring. What are they talking to you about? Well, they're certainly talking about taxes. They're certainly talking about development. But I think a close to home issue is the inordinate amount of construction projects that we have in Somerville and the traffic that goes along with them. People are frustrated to go and have them take 35 minutes to get from the west end of the city to the east end. I drop my daughter off at the high school every day on my way to work. I'm lucky if I get there within 45 minutes. And a lot of it is we have too many cars on the road, first of all, but we have a lot of construction projects that's narrowing the road. And the McGrath Highway project, you know, a lot of people say, well, you know, we can't wait for that project to be done.
And that's coming soon. My understanding is that the major ramp that takes you from McGrath Highway just beyond the bridge, that ramp is soon to be closed.
That's right.
And what's that going to do to the Medford Street traffic, and what's that going to do to Union Square? People trying to get down into Union Square. It's going to make
people cut through the neighborhoods like they do. It's going to cause a lot of local irritation and aggravation. And it's going to cause a lot of people to rethink their travel routes. Just
a free-floating question, though, Sean. I mean, you know, I was part of one of the groups that was looking at and studying the grounding of McGrath Highway itself. What are your thoughts about that? How do you think? I mean, the benefits of, you know, remarrying parts of Union Square into Brick Bottom and into the Inner Belt, but what does it do for traffic in the city?
While the project is being constructed, it creates, it takes a bad situation and makes it worse. It's a colossal project, and I don't know how that can happen without seriously undermining an already bad traffic problem to begin with.
Website, one more time.
Sean, S-E-A-N, the number 4, alderman.com.
Excellent. Anything else you want to add for the voters?
Just, I asked consideration for one of their 4 votes. I am running for alderman at large, and I think that the Alderman and the Board of Aldermen has seen a dramatic change in the last election cycle, and I think the board is now a lot open, a lot more transparent, and a lot more proactive in really challenging fine proposals by the administration, but asking the tough questions they need to, and I want to be part of that change.
Sean, best wishes on November 3rd. Thank you very much for joining us. It is my pleasure to welcome to the Somerville Community Access Television studios, Alderman at Large Mary Jo Rosetti, now running for her 2nd term. Welcome to SCATV.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much for the invite.
You all the way from the west part of the city to the east part of the city?
All the way.
All the way. So, you know, Mary Jo, these candidate profiles are meant to inform the public.
Yes.
We have an enormous amount of folks who have recently arrived to the city, say within the last 2 to 5 years. They may not know, you know, most of what you'd like the voters to know. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? You're a former school committee person, running for your 2nd term, Alderman at Large. You take it away.
Thank you, Joe. Yes, I have. I'm a lifer. My family raised me here in the city. I have 2 children, married with 2 children. My husband and I both attended the public school systems. And when our girls were young, I did become involved in the schools and sought election as a school committee person and was lucky enough to be elected, served 14 years on school committee. And when I announced my retirement from the school committee, I was urged by many members of the community, because I did not have it in my plan, to seek election as a member of Alderman at Large, because Alderman Desmond at that time had announced he was not going to seek a seat. It took some thought, but I'm glad that the community encouraged me, because I do have the bug. Once you get involved and you learn more about how the operations work and how you may be effective in certain ways, it's catching. And I'm pleased that I've had these past 2 years to try and add my 2 cents to what the community has expressed to me of their wishes and concerns. And I'm hoping that the community will reconsider me, and that when they vote in November, to continue at least 1 more term.
So just as a comparison, what's more work, the school committee or Alderman? And what's more fun, the school committee or Alderman?
I think they were both fun, and to a certain degree, to be quite honest, because sometimes when you're a little bit down from many meetings and it's not going in the direction you had hoped it would, lo and behold, there's a celebration in our community of some sort somewhere. And when you attend those celebrations, for me, that's what lifts me back up, and I realize this is why I do what I do. Look at that success across the stage. Look at this community gathering together to do it together, because it can't be done by one person. It has to be the community and the village, as the saying goes. I miss the school committee, and I say it to my colleagues in government who serve on the school committee all the time, miss you guys terribly. Having served as president of the State Association, I still have that link. I'm actually going next week to a conference, a statewide conference in Hyannis. I'm going to be a speaker, and I'm actually looking forward to seeing some friends I've made throughout the state when I served in the purpose of school committee. But I am truly enjoying my membership as a member of the Board of Aldermen and my association now with the Mass Municipal Association and attending their conferences as well.
So it sounds like you're having fun.
I am.
All right. We're going to go into some very brief questions. As I told you, these are more candidate profiles and what your thoughts are about some of the current issues facing the city, facing the voters, facing the Board of Aldermen. You know, I had said to you prior to the taping beginning that one of the elephant in the room for every elected official in this city and many, many people is the affordability. Somerville has come light years ahead from 20 years ago, 15 years ago. The renaissance of the city is staggering, to use a word that one of the other commentators used. One of the key issues in this election, Mary Jo, is going to be the affordability, not only of housing, but the actual cost of living, the fees and everything else that it takes to live here, whether you're a renter or a homeowner. Your thoughts on a couple of things. In general, the affordability. Secondary, would you be in favor, or what are your thoughts about the inclusionary housing where 12.5% is included as set aside for affordable housing units? Would you be in favor of an increase? Do you think that we have more work to do? Your thoughts on affordability and affordable housing.
Thank you for making that the first question, Joe, because that is the topic when I speak with anybody in the community, no matter how young or old. It is a grave concern. I feel as though the prices are spiraling. Some of it, unfortunately, is out of our control. As an example, if you own your home, you decide you want to sell it, I have no right to tell you, how dare you accept higher than asking price, much higher than asking price. So on the flip side, what can I do? Well, I won't jump to housing, that's the second part of the question, but the affordability piece, the fees and fines have been increasing. If you recall, last year, it was I who proposed a motion to urge the Traffic Commission to not, in fact, increase the fees for the parking, the placards that we get for visitors and the stickers for parking. I was disappointed to learn that the Board of Aldermen had no authority on that final vote. It was presented as part of the budget presentation of the department head to give us a heads up. But it was by...
in all actuality, it's the Traffic Commission who votes for that. And the aldermen have no control over that board.
We have no control. We have one vote. Bob McWaters, alderman from Ward 3, represents us on that commission. And he, in fact, was the sole no vote as it came to a vote because he supported the wish of my motion and my colleagues supporting the motion that we do not wish to support increase in fees.
So back onto the housing part of it, though, is much more difficult to control.
It is. It is. I'm pleased that the board together realized the new zoning overhaul that the administration proposed, the mayor and the administration proposed to us last year. Many meetings, and and when I went out to the community, I did my best to go to every community meeting I could. And when I attended them, I chose to sit in a spot where I didn't know anybody because I wanted to see their reaction to the discussion. And in the end, it was clear to me that those that took the time out of their lives to come to a community meeting, to have some questions answered, to try and understand it better, were more confused when the meeting was over than ever before. It created, too much confusion and concern. And part of it was people were starting to realize they wouldn't have control over development in their community, but the prices were going to be spiraling. So right now, what has been brought recently to the Board of Aldermen, which I wholeheartedly support, is consideration of increasing from 12.5%, bring it all the way up to 20. Now, 20 wasn't talked about in the proposal of the zoning change. I believe it was a suggested increase to 15. Then we had some discussion about bringing it to 17.5. Some members of the community discussed why not 20%. And I agree with the community who brought forward to the Board of Aldermen that now that there is a new zoning overhaul being proposed, The community meetings, I am told, will begin early November. They're 6 weeks behind in getting those meetings up and running. Why wait? Because it's my opinion and a lot of other people's opinions in talking with them that this new round of zoning overhaul change will bring with it many more meetings and many more questions.
And a lot more time.
And nothing will be happening while we're doing that discussion and investigation.
Meanwhile, you still have people being displaced and the city
Yes.
is still going through gentrification with no kind of safety net for those who can't afford million-dollar condos.
No.
So what's your general feel? I mean, can the Board of Aldermen speed up this process for the new zoning to include a higher set-aside, or is that going to be driven by the executive office, by the mayor?
It's my hope that we will, it has now gone to committee, land use. Alderman Sullivan chairs it. I asked that he call his next meeting as a meeting of the whole, because I am not assigned to that committee. And I wanted to be privy to discussion and to be able to cast a vote if there were any motions moved the first night we begin to discuss it. That meeting is coming up soon. But as one member of the Board of Aldermen, I hope that we can move this forward now as a separate item, let the whole zoning overhaul continue on in discussion. In the meanwhile, let's not wait. Let's move this increase of 20% inclusionary housing to be voted sooner, not wait for the total zoning overhaul.
It reminds me of a discussion I had when as you know, I ran for office as well, and I proposed a 15%, a hike from 12.5 to 15%, and I was laughed out of the room. So, you know, unfortunately, gentrification has taken place in the city. It will continue to take place because, as I've said many times before, the city is now a very, very sexy commodity. We have developers banging down the door. The last question on affordability, though, on the housing prices, if we do increase this to 20%, is there a fear on the Board of Aldermen that we may scare away developers if we're asking them for 20% set aside?
The Board of Aldermen as a unified group has yet to discuss this. My personal opinion is I'm not worried about that. I look at the costs that the developers and the mega bucks that the developers are making for themselves right now. I'm a homeowner. I don't know about you, Joe, but yes, every now and then I would get something in my home meal enticing me to consider selling my home. Now it's tenfold. Not only am I getting in the mail, I'm getting phone calls. No, there's no concern.
You know, I wanted to spend time on the affordability issue because I think it is at the forefront of discussions the board is having. But let's go into a couple of others on, you know, taxes, water and sewer, the fees and fines. All of that stuff is going up. What are you hearing from the voters when you're canvassing or when they're calling you about this stuff? Is it as big an issue now as it was, say, 6 years ago?
Taxes are always a concern. That is also in the conversation of constituents when I am talking, and I do try to talk to as many people as possible. The question that I have a hard time explaining to them, because I too have challenged the administration and the Treasury Department over and over again. We can't understand why is it that Assembly is now successfully up and running, continuing to grow, and why is it that our taxes are not showing some relief?
Where's the benefit to the homeowner when we were promised that all this commercial development would give us tax relief?
And we have to think long range, we have to look at the bell curve, and I have no patience to think in that avenue when the success is happening now.
Crime in the city is dropping. What are you hearing from the voters on that?
The ResiStat meetings in individual wards are very helpful to that. I think my hat goes off to the police department for helping to remind the community, why is it that we had an increased crime rate? This is what you can do in your home, your car, to stop that. And I believe that those ResiStat meetings have been very effective. The rate has gone down. It wasn't alarmingly high, but it is a very much better level now, because the community was educated by our beautiful, our wonderful police department.
So it was a cooperative effort between the city, the residents, the businesses, and the police department.
I feel so, yes.
We have a new policy coming up. I know that some of your constituents are going to be asking about it. The snow removal policy from going odd, even side.
Yes.
When the plows come up, the poor guys with the poor men and women with the driveway on the even side were always getting plowed in. We're now going to reverse that and do alternate plowing?
Yes, yes. I'm very pleased. I was one of I spearheaded this way back. the people on the odd side are not going to be
They may not
as
vote for
happy.
you this time
I
out.
know. I respect that, and I understand that. I actually, last night when the city released, yesterday the city released a press release. I shared it on my Facebook page. I shared it on my email listserv. And one gentleman, I got a lot of positives on my Facebook, which those are all even-side people. One person said boo, or said, oh, you know, he wasn't happy. And I said, let me guess, you're an odd side. And he said, yep.
Yeah.
Later on, as I tracked my postings, he then poked back in to comment. Everybody was responding to me by saying, you're right, I never thought of it that way. I'll bite it. You're right, it's time. It's time we share.
It's called the shoe was on the other foot.
Yeah, so I'm thrilled.
Let's talk a little bit about, you know, the mayor has very big plans about redoing some of the city-owned property. He wants a new high school, he wants a new library, he's bonding to redo City Hall a little bit, he wants a new fire station, new police station. What's your appetite for bonding or borrowing? You know, people you see the word bonding, it's nothing more than borrowing all that money for all these new buildings.
According to Mass General Law, the Board of Aldermen has to consider each capital project brought forward to them individually. So although there may be a lump on the table right now, we will take one at a time. We will consider one at a time. Perhaps we may have to prioritize them, but it's one building per vote, and how are we going to do it? One building up in the basket right now is a potential new Somerville High School building. I happen to serve on the building committee formed by the mayor as appointed by President White. The last meeting just the other day, Mr. Bean brought to the committee that, you know, there was a lot of conversation. Nothing has been decided yet, but the Prop 2.5 word came into conversation. Very well may come to that.
I'm going to let the voters talk to you about that. And you know, prior to the taping, I said, you know, 15 minutes goes very, very quickly.
Are we done?
We are almost done here. I want to thank you very much for coming down to SCATV.
This is my pleasure. Thank you.
And our best wishes for November 3rd.
Thank you very much.
And we're here with six-term Alderman at Large Dennis Sullivan. Dennis and his family make their home in the 10 Hills district of the city. It is my pleasure to welcome him back to Somerville Community Access Television. Welcome back.
Thank you, Joe.
Running for your 7th term.
Correct.
And you are a plethora of information. Prior to taping, we had a great talk. So let's move right into, there are some folks, Dennis, who have arrived in the city since the last election and may not know who you are. So for the purposes of introduction, I'll let you take it away and give them a little bit of background about yourself.
Thank you, Joe. A little bit about myself. Before serving on the Alderman, I was a school committee person from Ward 1, serving 3 terms. I served as a chairman. We built several new schools during that time at 90% reimbursement. I moved on to the Board of Aldermen. When Joe Curtatone became mayor, it created a vacancy. I was fortunate enough to win a crowded field, and I've been there, hard to believe, 12 years right now. A little bit that sets me apart from other aldermen is that I conduct neighborhood office hours. I do them twice a year, in the spring and in the fall, and I set up a table in every ward across the city, and it's a sounding board for people to come to me and tell me what's on their mind. It could be as simple as a pothole. As chairman of land use, we're looking at rezoning the city right now. A lot of people come and ask me questions about the zoning, or they'll tell me what they like about the zoning, what they don't like about the zoning. Recently, I was right across the street from the SCAT building at Dunkin' Donuts, and I heard a lot about Union United and what people thought. A lot of concerns about the density in the city. But I'm very proud of my outreach, and I return all my phone calls, and my emails get returned, and I'm very proactive.
Yep. So that's a great segue, Dennis. You know, Union Square is almost at the heart of the revitalization and the rejuvenation of the city. The Renaissance actually started in Assembly. It's moving its way over to Union Square. With that comes the elephant in the room, which is the subject of affordability. Affordability not only in the cost of living in the city, that it seems to be skyrocketing at this point, but the cost of housing. So the folks, you know, like Union United, and there are many other advocacy groups that are talking to you as one of their at-large aldermen, and talking to City Hall especially about what are the effects of all of this success that the city of Somerville is having. I want to let you take it away and talk about affordability issues as your voters and constituents are expressing to you.
No, it's a great point, Joe. There isn't a week goes by that I don't get a call from a senior citizen who's been renting here a long time that's being phased out, whether their place they're staying at is going condo, whether the rent is going up from $1,200 to $1,500 into the 2000s. It's incredibly difficult. Right now, we have a 12.5% inclusionary rate, meaning any development, 8 units or more, has to do 1 unit affordable at 12.5%. The current zoning proposed, we're going to have, we're looking at 20%, increasing that 12.5 to 20% in certain dense areas like Union Square, like Assembly Square is too late, but there's still a lot of development going on down there. So that's something I'm looking to increase, is that inclusionary affordable housing rate. Also, currently we have linkage fee for commercial development. So any commercial development over 30,000 square feet pays $5.15 a square foot. Cambridge, I believe, is in the $12 range. We have to do a better job at raising that. We're missing out a lot of opportunity, and that money goes into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, which I served on in the past, and it's seed money to create affordable housing. So there isn't going to be one magic answer or solution to the affordable housing crisis. It's going to be a number of things, from zoning to increasing the linkage to increasing the percentage. You know, I'm looking forward to working with a number of groups to do that. I'm all ears. I don't have the solution to that, but I have worked on it for a number of years, and I think we're making progress. But now more than ever, Somerville is exploding. We're a victim of our own success. You know, people want to be here. I look back 6 years ago when my wife and I bought our house in 10 Hills Road, and we could not afford that house today. And you know, for families starting out, it's incredibly difficult. Another thing.
Let's go. Let me stop you for 1 second, Dennis. You mentioned the fact that, you know, Assembly Square, it's a little too late for that. Here's one of the things that I'm hearing on the street, and I'm sure your voters are saying, what's taking so long to change that affordable housing percentage? Because if we wait too much longer, all the building is going to go up in Union Square, and then you've lost the opportunity. All the building will go up in Brick Bottom. All the building will go up in Inner Belt. What's holding up the change?
Right. In the summer, the mayor proposed new zoning to rezone the entire city. As chairman of the land use, which included a higher percentage of affordable housing, as chairman of the land use, there was not enough, in my opinion, outreach to the community. People, when they heard about the zoning or the increased density, there were a lot of concerns. So, you know, I slowed the process down. We're going to have a number of community meetings going forward around different issues, from mobility to affordable housing to public transportation to the process involved. That's going forward. At the last Alderman's meeting, Alderman Niedergang, which I supported this proposal, called for 20%, increasing it to 20%. There's going to be a meeting on that of the Land Use Committee, and that is going forward. I don't think we can wait for the zoning, because the zoning is not going to be passed, I don't believe, or we cannot get that in place, I don't think, until the spring of next year.
So a couple of things, Dennis. When you talk about there was some resistance from the communities where this rezoning was going to allow for greater density, explain to the folks, when you say greater density, you're talking about going up.
Going up, definitely. Right. In commercial development, going up a number of stories. You know what that looks like. When people hear how it's going to affect their sight line, the traffic pattern,
right,
the parking situation, they have huge concerns. Right. And we're already one of the most densely populated cities, you know, in the Commonwealth.
Does it make any sense to you? I've heard this from constituents all over the place. Does it make any sense to you when we boast that we're one of the most densely populated cities on the East Coast? Does it make any sense to you to make it even more dense?
Well, I think density done right, such as Assembly Square, such as in the Inner Belt, you know, it's basically a blank canvas down there that we can get density right. Assembly Square has the orange line. If we can do it in a right manner, I think it makes sense.
A little bit of a different beast, though, because
right.
Assembly Square wasn't a neighborhood.
Right, exactly.
Yep.
And same thing with the Inner Belt. It's not a neighborhood either. So, you know, I think we have to get it right. And just getting through here to come here at 5 o'clock at night, the traffic involved. We have partners. East Somerville is busting at the seams as far as, I have my office hours there Saturday. I heard over and over about the traffic problems created. You have one lane of traffic on Broadway, one on Washington Street. You have traffic coming off I-93 right there at the intersection of Mount Vernon Street. It's a real problem. And then you add 5,000 people to the mix going in at partners. It's only going to get worse. So, you know, we have to do a better job at controlling that, making sure cut-through traffic doesn't happen in those neighborhoods, creating an unsafe environment.
Assembly Square is your neighborhood neighbor.
Correct.
You're on 10 Hills, it's your neighborhood. What are people saying about the height of that partner's building?
You know, I haven't heard much. I mean, I can see it when I walk my dog up 10 Hills Road, I can see the height. I have not heard much about it. I think, you know, it's not really affecting, we can see it, but it's not affecting our sunlight. It's not affecting on the other side, the East Somerville neighborhood too much. So I haven't heard much negativity.
That remains to be seen when the traffic starts.
Right,
we'll see what happens then. Let's stay on affordability just for a minute, and I'll weave some of the other issues that are out there in terms of the fees and the fines and the water bills and taxes. What are you hearing from the voters on those issues?
Well, I mean, people are upset that when the fees go up, whether it's more money for a parking pass, they feel like they're getting nickel and dimed. We have a 30% residential exemption if you live in your house. How that works is they take the entire levy of taxes, and each homeowner gets approximately $140,000 off the value of their house. So it's a really good deal if you own a condo or if your house is not worth much. But people say 30% residential tax exemption. If you have $1 million home, you're still only getting $140,000 break on the home.
Off the assessed value.
Which does help. But people on fixed incomes, you know, having to pay all these extras, we're an MWRA, we're paying a high premium for water and sewer. It's an expensive place to live.
Sure.
Quite frankly.
That's the conundrum. You know, you mentioned it before. We are going to be a victim of our own success, where we become, and I say it jokingly to the mayor and to other people, we've become a sexy commodity here in the metropolitan area. Everybody wants to get in. Everybody wants a piece of the pie. So that's where I go back to ask the question again. You would be in favor of hiking the affordable housing percentage, hiking that now rather than waiting for the zoning?
Right, I think we can definitely go to 20%. I'd like to go higher. If the studies come back, I know that's one of the things that Office of Housing and Community Development is studying. We're looking to get the result of that back. It should be in, I think, in the next month or so, from what I understand from talking to Director Proakis. But definitely we have to do something. And
crime in the city, you know, when you were elected, you lived down in East Somerville, and crime was a pretty dicey subject to be bringing up. Violent crime in the city has plummeted. What do you attribute that to?
We have a new chief. We have a chief that was from the department. I think he's doing a great job. I think people, you know, the department, they're feeling that the department's working in the right direction. I think, you know, as a city, we're going in the right way. I think the high school does a great job with their programs at that level. And, you know, however, I think one thing that we have to pay attention to is the opiate crisis. 2 people in my neighborhood in the past 2 years passed away, young people. You know, I've supported a substance abuse counselor for the Somerville Police Department to work with families, but we have to go beyond that. As a state, I know the governor right now is talking about giving doctors the ability to keep somebody for 72 hours under the opiate, who's under opiates, but we have to have treatment on demand. You know, there's no way around it. People are dying out there. I read today on the web that the Somerville Fire Department used Narcan 70 times last year. That's a recent development.
That's where is it both police and fire are now equipped with Narcan?
I believe just the fire department right now.
Fire department. Right. So they're responding to an emergency, a possibility of an overdose. That's saving lives.
Saving lives, correct.
Yep.
But I mean, that's a stopgap measure. You know, we have to do more prevention, and it has to be quality treatment program.
Let's hope we get to a day when the fire department no longer needs Narcan. I know those are issues that you've fought for many times, domestic violence, the opioid problem in the city. Let's move on, if you will, Dennis. You did mention something about, you know, a new high school, a new police station. The mayor has grandiose plans, my word, grandiose plans. New high school, new library, new police station headquarters, new fire headquarters. How are you going to pay for that? what do you think about all of these plans in terms of, because we're going to have to borrow?
Right, we have to bond. I think we have to do it in a measured approach, and we have to have the means to do that. Mr. Bean in the Finance Department, I think, does a great job. The Board of Aldermen is a fiduciary watchdog of the city. You know, as one member, as one alderman, that's always concerning, and how much debt that we have, how much debt we incur.
Because you got to pay it back at some point.
Without a doubt. But we have to have good public safety, headquarters facilities for training. These things are needed. Quite frankly, the Somerville Police Department, the headquarters is a sick building. Half of it is being utilized. The basement is not being utilized at all. We have to do better for our men and women in blue, but also, it's about protecting the community at large, and that's a piece of it.
And it's a dicey proposition. I mean, where do you prioritize? You prioritize the, first responders who keep our lives safe. You prioritize the education of the youth that are coming through the city. I get but my point in asking the question to all the aldermen at large candidates is, how are you going to prioritize that stuff? That's going to be something that will come up over the next 2 to 4 years.
Right.
So one more question on, there's a new policy that just came out. It was announced about the snow removal policy. They're going to institute odd, even switching sides. So if you are used to moving your car to the even side of the street, now you're going to have to get used to moving it to the odd. Tell me a little bit about it.
I've lived on the even side my whole life. And the one thing, especially when you have a winter like we had last year, it's about equity. It's about the fairness of the snow being piled on your side year after year and getting pounded and pounded into the ground. A lot of people were at their wits' end. The mayor, about a year ago, came out saying he was talking about maybe doing a pilot program in certain neighborhoods, but I think finally, I think he made a great decision. The even year, we're going to have one more. We're in an odd year right now. We'll keep it on the odd side. The side will be cleared on the odd side, and starting next year, we'll have the clear side on the even side.
We're going to have to wait for that because I've pulled in all of my chits. We're not going to have any snow this year at all.
I'm praying. I hope you're right, but the Farmer's Almanac would disagree with you.
Dennis, the website where the voters can find out more about you and get in contact with you.
aldermansullivan.org.
aldermansullivan.org. Thank you. It's been my pleasure. Best wishes on November 3rd.
Pleasure was all mine. Thank you.
And I'm here with Alderman at Large Bill White, 9-term Alderman at Large in the city of Somerville and 2-term President of the Board of Aldermen in the city of Somerville. It is my pleasure to welcome him back to Somerville Community Access Television. Welcome back.
Thank you for having me, Joe. It's always a pleasure to be here.
And you are no stranger to Union Square. I'm not. Other folks have heard it. You were born in this area, right down here in the Union Square district. So, Bill, there are some folks who arrived in our fair city prior to the last election, or just prior, and post last election. So I figure it's always better to have the candidate tell the viewers a little bit about themselves. Take it away.
All righty. Thank you, Joe. Yeah, as you said, I grew up in this neighborhood, and that actually had an effect on me. It was a working class neighborhood back then, first and second generation immigrants and children of immigrants. Where the Target is today was an operating slaughterhouse when I was a kid. And one of the things that had an impact on me was the help that people gave me, for instance, in college and in high school, the teachers with scholarship assistance. And it allowed me to go to Harvard College and then Georgetown Law School, get a law degree, clerk for a federal judge, and then go into private practice. But it wasn't just me, it was my parents, of course, but also the help of a lot of people. And the community that we had then had programs in place to help people. So I became interested in politics, and a lot of what I've tried to do on the Board of Aldermen is to give back to the community, to put things in place to help folks out, especially who may be disadvantaged, to make Somerville an attractive place for a whole cross-section of folks with a wide variety of backgrounds and beliefs, but making it a community, not just a place where people come, they hang their coat up, maybe they stay a year or two and move on. my goal is to do whatever I can as an alderman to create that sense of Somerville community and keep it moving in that direction. So we're not a place of strangers, but a real community with a lot of social groups, civic groups, where people are engaged and they can believe they're participating in their future.
Well, I think, you know, Bill, you and I both being native-born sons here in the city, we remember, you know, Somerville is a great place during our youth of community and civic groups. And then we also remember when Somerville was a little rough around the edges. In the recent years, you know, the renaissance of the city of Somerville, you touched on it earlier in your intro, is that, you know, it's a great place to live. People want to live here now. We're becoming a city of those that have and those that don't. So one of the things, you know, I've asked some of the other alderman at large candidates to address right off the bat is the affordability issue here in the city. It seems to be the hot topic in some of the other alderman races. It's the hot topic certainly in my neighborhood, and I'm sure it's the hot topic in yours. Affordability in Somerville, gentrification, set aside for affordable housing. You take it away.
Sure, thank you, Joe. Affordability encompasses a number of things. One of the things that I did was I put in, many years ago, a residential tax exemption. Originally, when I was an alderman, it had been 17%. I put in legislation to 30%, and now it's 35%. I called on the creation of a home rule petition. That saves, this is a resident Somerville homeowner, $2,400 a year. So how does that help affordability? It helps it in two ways. One is, if we didn't have that, just think a lot of homeowners out there, if you were paying $2,400 a year more in taxes, would you be staying in Somerville? And also, what kind of rents would you charge? I think it's fair to say, and again, I don't want to chastise all absentee landlords, but usually folks who live in their house have a little different view of who they're going to rent to. They like to rent to longer-term tenants. They're not going to cram 4 and 5 people into a unit. They're not going to, you know, wreak havoc in the neighborhood. Generally, they're going to be good with things like trash, cleanliness, and noise. So one of the ways to keep Somerville affordable is through the residential exemption. And what we're noticing now, Joe, is most of the homes that are rented, for instance, Somerville, are 2- and 3-family homes. And because of the residential exemption, we're able to keep track of what's happening with our resident homeowners. And a lot of the resident homeowners now are selling in the 2- to 3-family house range. And what they're selling to, unfortunately, a lot of them are the absentee landlords. Because housing prices are so high, somebody who's going to buy a house to live in it is going to be outbid by somebody who's going to use that house for rental. So we're seeing a lot of the rental properties that could go to families and be affordable being lost. So we have to make up that difference. So one of the ways to do that is through the affordability increasing in the set-aside.
So before we get into it, though, Bill, I don't think you're suggesting that we tell these existing 2-family homeowners that they can't sell for a greater profit. I think what you're saying is it's a conundrum that folks who have owned their 2-family or 3-family home for years and years and years, and maybe at the end of, you know, thinking about retirement, that's a perfectly legitimate strategy for them to sell. The problem comes in is that it's the absentee landlord who may not have the commitment to community.
Right, no, of course, nobody would, I mean, there's no way you can restrict anybody from selling their house, and that it would be silly for anybody to assume that we should even do that as a city. No, that's what somebody owns. So what you have to do is take into account the market forces and try to then help it out. So yes, so when somebody sells their house to the highest bidder, right now the folks who are paying the highest amount are pretty much going to be your absentee landlords who are going to use it for rental properties, and generally the rents that they have to get just to justify the price that they're paying are more than a resident would pay. So you see your rents going up and families being priced out and being substituted again with, say, young professionals or with students who, you know, 4 or 5 of them together, you know, chip in to pay the rent. So as a city official, seeing those housing units lost, we have to make up for it. So one of the ways you try to make up for it is by increasing the percentage set aside. And that doesn't apply to 2, 3, 4 family houses. So it really doesn't affect any average or regular Somerville homeowner.
It's mainly new development.
This is going to be the new development that's going to be affected. And you know, everything you see there, it's top dollar that's being charged. So it isn't that, you're having like substandard property, you can't have the percentage increased because then the developer will say, well, I can't do it as a profit. No, these are prime
What should we tell
pieces of
those
real
developers
estate.
if he says he can't do it as a profit? We'll find another developer who can.
If it's city-owned property, yes. And if it's clear that the city is going to insist on a higher percentage set aside, then maybe the developer who now owns the property and then who's selling it to another developer won't be able to sell it for as much. But again, it does not affect the average Somerville resident. It's really an effect upon, you know, developers who are now making much more money on these developments. This is not the Somerville of the 80s where, you know, unfortunately back then we had a lot of substandard housing and people would say, well, you don't want to quell or put a damper in development because we have all of this substandard housing that we need to improve. Our housing stock right now is among the best in the Commonwealth to begin with. So these are really, when you look at it, it's getting to the heart of major developments that are going to generate millions of dollars, and we're looking for just an increase in the affordable housing set aside. And what I would like it to do also is to be set aside first for Somerville residents who are being displaced. So if you live in an area because developments are going and your rents are going up, you're
For
being
instance,
displaced,
Union Square.
Union Square, then you, as a Somerville resident in the area, would have priority. And then second, I would like it then to go to Somerville residents in general before it goes to folks from outside of Somerville.
Where do you think we should go from 12.5 to what, 15, 20,
15,
25?
I haven't heard anybody suggest 20. I've heard 15. There was a recent proposal that was just submitted by a number of Somerville voters to go to 20%. You know, I look forward to looking at the studies that we're going to have for it to see 15 or 20. Maybe it will be 20% in certain areas, 15% in others. You know, again, it's just been presented, and I always like to look at the arguments on both sides before making a final conclusion. I have concluded it has to be raised. It's just now a matter of the percentage and where that percentage would be appropriate.
You've been around the city for many, many years. You've heard the arguments on parking. You've heard the complaints on rats. You've heard about taxes and water and fees and fines. Talk a little bit about it and then wrap it up with one of the things that I think all of the candidates are saying is that crime, violent crime in this city has taken a precipitous drop, and that's something that everyone should be proud of.
Yeah, as an alderman at large, I've historically put in an order where we go over the crime statistics in our Committee on Public Health and Public Safety, and you see the crime statistics for anything that would be considered violent or you know, non-penny ante type of crime going down. I mean, you do have some house break-ins that sometimes they go up, sometimes they go down, and that actually can depend upon, you know, a couple of folks if they're released from prison and, you know, they're not put in a program or whatever, or, you know, especially if it's drug-related. Sometimes you'll see one or two people responsible for an increase
multiple crimes
in areas. So putting those aside, our police department has done a tremendous job. Some, you know, is, when you look at the statistics, a safe community. You know, we've addressed the rodent problem, state of the art. Now they're working in conjunction with an outfit that's doing studies on basically rodent birth control. I mean, people laugh about it, but that's one of the things that's most effective. They believe. And the other thing we're trying to do is educate folks, because, you know, when people have rodent problems in an area, they'll say, well, maybe the city, why don't you bait? Baiting is only effective if there's no other food source.
Right.
A lot of times there are food sources. So what we have is a program where the inspectors actually go through the neighborhoods and, you know, seek out sources, inform, you know, residents about things they could do maybe to cut down on potential food and water sources for the rodents.
Well, I think one of the things that, you know, the city did do was to institute the standardized recycling and trash receptacles. And quite frankly, in my own neighborhood, it's cut down significantly because, as you say, you know, the absentee landlords are dependent sometimes, and I have a lot of friends who are renters, but the renters weren't as diligent on trash night. You know, you'd see the big trash bags go out on the sidewalk on trash night. That's a buffet for the rats that are in the neighborhood. So kudos to the city for that. But let's go into one of the other things that the Traffic Commission has recently instituted, which is the new snow removal policy. My phone and my texts started to go off the hook when that came in. There are people who are thrilled about it. There are other folks who are saying, why are you giving me the burden of this? Your thoughts on it?
Well, first, I'm glad you mentioned, Joe, there's the Traffic Commission. A lot of folks, especially those new to Somerville, think the Board of Aldermen would have control over things like traffic regulations, one-way streets, and the like. Back in the late 70s, the city charter was amended so that there is actually a separate a separate Traffic Commission that is set up, and they are independent of the Board of Aldermen, and they have the total say. Now, since I was first elected on the Board of Aldermen, folks on the other side of the street have raised complaints about how unfair it was that there was parking only on one side of the street during snow emergencies, and the board looked at it, and it made recommendations to the mayor and the Traffic Commission, but ultimately it was the Traffic Decision's decision, and now they finally made the decision to go to the alternate approach, which I think is equitable.
So the Board of Aldermen set up the Traffic Commission?
No, there was a city charter
City
amendment.
charter.
Right.
So it would take a city charter to undo that, to take the commission out from underneath an autonomous state and put it back under the Board of Aldermen.
Yeah, essentially, I think it even requires a referendum of the voters to vote to take away the Traffic Commission, because the view back then was, instead of making traffic decisions political, like instead allow, supposedly, the professionals with traffic engineer, police, fire, other DPW involved to look at it, we'll say, quote unquote, objectively.
Let the professionals do it rather than the professional politicians.
Right, that's what the view was.
The mayor has proposed over the last few years spending oodles of money for a new high school, a new library, new police headquarters, new fire headquarters, you name it. I noticed that the Board of Aldermen recently approved a bonding for a study on the City Hall itself to try to do some needed repairs and bring it up to speed. Your thoughts, Bill, on how much of this realistically can get done over the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? And what are your thoughts about borrowing? A lot of people use the word bonding. I call it borrowing. What are your thoughts?
Well, as Alderman, who one time was chair of finance and now is president, I'm always concerned about bonding because you have to make sure that debt service does not become a burden. Now, people will see every year we pass bonds, but the truth of the matter is bonds are also retired every year. So the fact that the city issues bonds doesn't necessarily mean your debt is going up, because others could have been retired. So you want to try to keep it constant within a certain range. Now, yes, the mayor has called for a number of things which raise the question, would we have the ability to pay that debt service for a new high school, a new library, like you say? So one of the things you have to look at is, first, what kind of assistance can we get for these things? So hopefully from the state we'll get 80% reimbursement. So yes, there'll be a sizable amount, but we really do need a high school. A library, is another question. Can a library or a police or a fire station be incorporated with proposed developments? So as part of the deal with the developer, we either get it for free or you get it at a substantially reduced price as part of the package that the developer provides. So yes, we have to be very cautious, and we have to explore alternative ways to get these things built, because right now we're at our Proposition 2.5 limit, and we've been that way for a while. So every year we're taxed to the maximum. If your debt service were to go up at a percentage basis higher, then you would either have to cut someplace else or you would have to try a Proposition 2.5 override. At this point, I do not think the public would be, willing to go for Proposition 2.5
And I don't think I'm going to find any of the candidates for Alderman at large who are going to say yes, they'd be willing to do it. Right. Bill, 15 minutes goes fast here at SCATV, so I want to thank you for coming back down. How can folks get a hold of you?
The easiest way is to go to the city's website. My telephone number is there, and my email address. My email address is william.a.white@verizon.net.
Great.
My phone number is 617-625-9100.
Thank you, Bill. My guest has been 9-term Alderman at large and 2-term President of the Board of Aldermen. Thanks for watching. See you next time.